Good evening and welcome to the very first edition of the Box to Box podcast. This is the national local TV podcast on, of course, the local TV network. It is a bit of a new thing that we're trying out here. We have 4 different fans from 4 different football clubs and we'll all introduce ourselves individually. I'll start with myself first. So my name's Liam. I'm a Newcastle United fan. And I don't really have much to talk about in this podcast, I'll be honest. It's been a bit quiet on in the Northeast at the minute, but we will see what we can make of it. We've got Billy as well, who's, of course, a Wolves fan. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, as Liam said, I'm Billy and I'm a Wolves fan. A bit like Liam, not got too much to talk about for Wolves in the past few weeks, but hopefully we can cover some of the big stories that are going on throughout England.
Of course, we've also got Theo as well. Theo, how you doing, mate?
All good, Liam. Thank you. I'm an Arsenal fan. The pre-season's underway. We had our last game over the weekend at the Emirates, but we were meant to go to America. But as of course, the pandemic has changed everything. And I guess we will talk about the changes that COVID has put on our football game. So yeah, I'm an Arsenal fan. Some things are happening, but we'll get into that.
Of course, and you mentioned there the postponement of the pre-season tour. That is something that we will get onto just a little bit later in the podcast. We've also got Dan as well. Dan, mate, how's it going?
Yeah, sound. Cheers. A Liverpool fan. Things are ticking over. More speculation than actual deals at the minute, which is pretty standard for Liverpool summer. But Virgil van Dijk and Joe Gomez are back, so it's all good.
Of course, I'm sure you'll be hoping for the title this season. I feel like this season, the way it's sort of shaping up with things like transfers, new rules coming in, things like that, it is really shaping up to be an absolutely cracking season. The first topic that we want to talk about is, of course, VAR. It was incredibly controversial in last season, a lot of last season's games, you know, with things like slide penalties being given, maybe some dodgy offsides, little toes offside, things like that. Thankfully, those rules are changing and we are seeing maybe more accurate VAR calls. Maybe soft penalties won't be given as much. Offsides will be given a little bit of leeway. Billy, I'll come to you first. Is it good to see that they have reviewed what went wrong last season and they're making basically an immediate change on it?
Yeah, definitely. The whole reason for VAR coming in the first place was to cover the clear and obvious errors that referees were giving. But it was, it quickly become obvious that it was changing every little decision that was being given, every goal that was going in, every questionable offside. It was always checking it, and you could see some of the decisions that were being given, like the Liverpool goal at Goodison last season, when I think Mane's toe was just offside, and decisions like that. Nobody wants to see those in football. So if they can give just the clear and obvious decisions, then I think everyone's in favour of that.
Of course, I completely agree. Evening to Johnny, who says, evening, lads. He is part of the local TV network, covers a lot of the Leeds United stuff for the network. Theo, coming to you next. Of course, VAR, I think it did favour certain teams. I think as a Newcastle fan, we have had a couple of instances where VAR has maybe been on our side. With the new changes coming in, especially with things with penalties, do you reckon we could see less goals in games, or do you think this could actually increase the amount of goals that get scored or that are conceded for different teams?
Do you know what? I was thinking about this. I'm not entirely sure whether this will make a huge difference, because last year we had that incident with Harry Maguire and Azpilicueta, and Maguire basically had both his arms around Azpilicueta, and Chelsea didn't get a penalty, and it was in the box, and the whistle had been blown. So it's just stuff like that. And as you were saying earlier, people's toes being offside. There was one, Ceballos scored a goal, but Saka's foot was offside in the build up to it. And then just finally, I think Pickford as well, he tackled Van Dijk. I don't know if you guys remember that. But the offside flag had basically gone up already. But he could have been sent off, and VAR, it didn't change anything. So yeah, as they say, no more minimal contact penalties and no marginal offsides. But will it actually happen? I don't know. It will be nice to see, it actually work. But as for most of you guys who go to the stadium a lot, it's a bit annoying because sometimes you don't know when VAR is being used. You're sort of sat there in silence. But hopefully this year we'll actually see some difference. It will actually make a difference or not. Who knows?
As well, Theo, do you think VAR sort of favoured any teams last season at all?
There were some teams who were quite lucky, especially when you're 0-0 and it could have been given a penalty, and then you'd have lost that game. But I think Arsenal were a bit unlucky. I'm going to speak about my team. I think we were a bit unlucky in certain games. But in terms of who were favoured, I don't know the specific numbers for every team at the moment. I had to look at this. But in terms of Arsenal, we were very unlucky in a lot of games. And hopefully luck is on our side this season with these new changes.
Of course, let's hope so. Big changes coming in regards to VAR, Dan. Of course, Liverpool, I think, had sort of either end of the stick last season in terms of luck with VAR. Sometimes it was on their side, sometimes it wasn't. The big one, like Theo mentioned before as well, was that big tackle on Virgil van Dijk by Jordan Pickford. You had a little bit of a laugh to yourself when he mentioned it. They've not really said anything about sort of giving away red cards. They have changed the rules, or they did, change the rules mid-season in regards to that, actually. I think they made it so referees could actually go and check on the sidelines themselves. Yeah. Do you reckon the new changes to VAR this season will make a big impact? Or
to be honest, no. I think the changes they've implemented are all the right things, and they've said all the right stuff. I think we've just watched the Euros, and VAR was implemented so much better in that. I thought it worked really well, and I think even the English referees that were there managed to deal with it a lot better than they do in this country. I think it was Anthony Taylor and Michael Oliver. My major concern, I spoke about this all season, is not necessarily VAR, it's the way our refs use it. And that hasn't changed. That's not going to change for this season. Like we spoke about the Van Dijk incident, which was Michael Oliver. That wasn't VAR. That was because it was offside, but he can still be sent off after offside. Because otherwise, as soon as the flag goes up, you could just hit someone and nothing to be done about it. You know what I mean? So you can still be sent off after an offside. So that was just poor refereeing. And I think ultimately that's what it comes down to, unfortunately, in this country. So I do have my concerns. Having said that, I hope it improves, because I thought it was farcical at times last year, not just from a Liverpool perspective. I think I seen the Patrick Bamford one when he was pointing where to get the ball and they did him for offside on his forearm. Like, that can't be happening. Yeah. You know what I mean? Stuff like that's just laughable. So hopefully it clicks into gear properly.
Of course, yeah. I think, like we mentioned, we've sort of been on either end of the stick with this one. Like I said as well, Newcastle, I think, maybe a bit more favourable. You can remember that Tottenham game where I believe it was like the 97th minute or something like that in Eric Dyer. The ball just sort of landed on his arm. You can't do anything about it, but a penalty was given. Hopefully those rules do change, and in regards to red cards as well, hopefully they do take more of a sort of strict stance on it, and we could possibly see some more red cards this season. We will have to see, though. Of course, moving on, the sort of big talking point as well this season is how much the coronavirus could impact this season. Of course, it had its times last season where obviously we did have fans into the ground sometimes, and there were times where games were postponed due to the coronavirus. We'll come to Billy on this one first. Do you reckon, COVID, of course, it hasn't just disappeared. There are still loads and loads of cases in the country. Do you reckon it'll have a big impact on the way that the seasons sort of get structured at all? Or
I think in terms of games being played and the people in and around the clubs, a lot of them will be heavily protected. I think the rules around what players can do when they meet a fan or so on, they're under very strict rules. I think the biggest change will be fans spending money on tickets and booking their travel, and then maybe they get a notification that have to isolate, or they might test positive before the game, and you might see a few empty seats in and around the stadiums. I think that would be the biggest thing for me. But in terms of the actual players, I think it's so strict that it'll be very difficult for there to be an outbreak within the actual athletes.
Of course, and Theo, moving on to with this one, of course, I think the impact on fans will probably be bigger than the impact on players. What do you think the fans can do, and what do you think football clubs can do to ensure that there isn't a massive outbreak in between fans, in between the players as well?
It's such a difficult one, because they're trying to balance, allowing all those fans back in, especially you've got tens of thousands of people in the stadium, but also protecting their players. We've seen over time that you can ask players to do something, but then they could go and do whatever they want in their own spare time. At Arsenal, we were supposed to go to America, as I mentioned earlier, and there was an outbreak. They don't say who. They obviously, to protect the players and staff, they just say someone, a member of staff, tested positive, so that's why we couldn't go to America. So really, you can do all you can tell players, don't go out, don't go do this, but you don't know who's coming into their house and all that kind of thing in their own spare time, unless you then have to start putting CCTVs in players' houses, and it becomes a bit it becomes a bit too much.
A bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, but just as an experience, last week I went to the Emirates, and you had to do a PCR test before you went, and I was fortunately negative. And then you either had to show that you are double jabbed. But I was a bit concerned because I was thinking, so what if I do test positive the day before? Because they only sent the email at like 11 o'clock on a Friday, and the game was on the weekend, on the Sunday. And I've already paid money to go and train tickets and all that kind of thing. But when I got there, none of the stewards checked, and you didn't have to wear a mask at all. You just walk around. So how this is all going to work, if people then start getting pinged left, right, and center, it's just going to be a logistical nightmare. So I don't know the best way. Maybe just to buy stuff on your credit card, but I don't know if clubs are going to give you your money back. They didn't last year with membership fees, but I think it's going to be a long season ahead if people start getting pinged left, right, and center.
Definitely, it is going to be, I think, a really, really tricky one to work out. I saw the pictures you posted in the group chat of the game as well. I really, really miss going to football games. I managed to get to a non-league game just a couple of weeks ago, but it doesn't beat going to a proper Premier League stadium, big crowd, big atmosphere. The pre-match pints, everything like that. I do miss it, and hopefully we can get back to St James's Park soon. Dan, coming to you next. Obviously, we spoke a little bit before about the cancellation of some pre-season tours, certain pre-season games overseas getting cancelled as well. Do you reckon that'll have an impact on clubs, in the long run, or maybe just for the first few games?
I think probably just for the first few games. I think clubs are well versed in this now. We had all these problems last year, and if we could get over what we faced last season, we should be able to get over what's about to come around the corner. There are going to be difficulties, and there will be cases, and there will be, isolation pings and all that sort of stuff. But I do think we are getting to a world now, and hopefully a football world, whereby we're more proactive in kind of getting on with things. And I think we've had a bad 15 months. There's no getting away from it. Like, it's been horrendous. And we've had to take all these precautions to make sure we can carry on. But now vaccinations are getting rolled out, etc., etc., and we've learned to live with this a little bit better. I do hope that football can continue normally, because I personally, I'm going back to Anfield on Monday. We got Osasuna in a friendly. I personally don't want to see football without fans again. That's just my viewpoint on it, and it might be a little bit fanciful, and I know we had to do it for 12 months, but if it happened again, I personally wouldn't want football to continue.
You wouldn't want. You would just want it postponed.
Yeah,
it was incredibly depressing. I think watching the games, especially this whole season. Just without any fans. There was the odd game, wasn't there, in December time, where they had some fans, and then that was it. And of course, the last couple of games of the season, then that was it. It was incredibly depressing to watch, because certain games they would have had that capacity crowd. It would have really lifted the players up. It would have meant. It would have been an absolutely cracking game, but we will hopefully just have to see. I'm not sure if there's any talk of doing a reduced capacity, or if there's just going to be full capacity. I know, like Theo said, that they are doing the PCR test, and then obviously proof of double jabs as well. I think that's probably the good way to do it. I know they were talking about bringing in vaccine passports as well. Don't think that's really the right way to go.
Do you know what? I thought maybe it's just the way they've worded it. So you have to download the NHS app, and it basically says for you to have you have a digital pass. Essentially, isn't that a passport? So if you have a passport, you walk around with it and you show your identification, whatever. But they've called it a pass, as if it's not a passport, similar to what they're going to introduce in clubs. So basically, it's already existing, and it's just down to the stewards at the stadium. Are they going to check it or not?
It's really, really weird, and I don't know if it's the right way to go. I think obviously proof of your double jab is good, just to make sure that everything's going to be okay, or maybe a negative PCR test. But I don't know. I think it's still really early doors, and we don't really still don't know what's what. Moving on, anyways. Of course, this Sunday the Community Shield is taking place with Man City and Leicester taking each other on at Wembley Stadium, and I think it's got the capacity to be an absolute cracker. We usually do see some quite good Community Shield games. Billy, coming to you first. Who do you fancy in this game?
I think City will obviously be the massive favourites for the squad they've got, obviously managed by Pep, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him chuck in a few younger players, just to give him a run out, give his more experienced players who've been on international duty an extra week's rest maybe, and that'll open the door to Leicester. I mean, there's no reason why Leicester can't win if it's full strength team versus full strength team, but I think, most people will back City in that scenario, but it should be an interesting game. I think Leicester, they'll go full strength. It's another good opportunity to get a bit of silverware. And, if they win this, it gives them good momentum going into the season. And maybe this would be the year that they break into the top four. But I think City should win at the weekend, but who knows? Leicester have a good chance.
Of course, yeah, I completely agree with you. You've got to remember at some point last season when Man City and Leicester played each other, Leicester won 5-2. So they're definitely going to be up for it. Like you said, Billy, if it's another chance of silverware, why not go for it? It's Theo coming to you next. It should be a cracking game on Sunday, but who do you reckon could take the score?
I'm with Billy on that one. It's going to be Man City. I was reading earlier today, Pep Guardiola is already, doing mind games and saying he's going to be playing his second string team. And you never know. He's just going to come out with all the big guys. But a lot of them played in the Euros and other competitions. But it probably is going to be an interesting game. I hear Johnny Evans is not around at the moment. But Jamie Vardy is. He played in a game a few days ago in pre-season. But I do think Man City have got this game. And whether Pep Guardiola is playing mind games or not, I think they've probably got the upper hand in this one.
I feel like a second string team for Man City is still like a first team for a top 10 club still. So even then, I think Brendan Rodgers and Leicester should be incredibly scared. Dan, coming to you next, of course, Leicester, Man City, both teams off of incredible seasons, of course, Champions League finalists in Man City, FA Cup winners in Leicester. How do you think this game could go?
Yeah, it's difficult to call, I always think, the Community Shield, because we don't quite know where both sides are at in terms of their pre-season. I think, although Pep might be playing mind games, bless him with his £1 billion second team squad, I do think that he probably is likely to play a weaker side than he probably would do sort of first Premier League game of the season. So it gives Leicester a shoe-in, because Billy's right, Leicester, silverware, Wembley, big chance to get, their name slightly higher again, if you like, in the echelons of English football. And they've signed quite well, Leicester, as well. They signed Patson Daka from Salzburg, who've started really well. So yeah, they have a chance. But listen, City, pretty much every time they walk out onto a football field, the favourites. So they're going to be favourites again. But for lots of reasons, I hope Leicester can do it.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest, I probably will be rooting for Leicester. I always love an underdog story. We will have to see, though, what happens. Of course, Sunday, Leicester and Man City taking each other on at Wembley Stadium. So I'm just looking out my window. It's absolutely chucking it down here. Moving on, though, and this is probably my favourite part of the podcast. I've been really looking forward to talking about this one. It is, of course, the rumour mill for transfers. Really, really looking forward to talking about this. I'll start. Newcastle United, absolutely nothing. No, I'm joking. We've got possibly Joe Willock in the pipeline. This is something I want to talk to you about, actually, Theo. Joe Willock, do you rate him as a player?
Did you see his goal on the weekend against Chelsea? But there was no VAR.
Ghost goal, yeah.
Yeah, there was no VAR, and it clearly, I've watched it about 10 times. The whole ball crossed the line. But yeah, Joe Willock, great player. He hit a bit of form last season, as you would know, and I've highly rated him for some years now. I've watched him come through the ranks at Arsenal and getting into the first team, playing Europa League and that kind of thing. But I think the difficulty he's had is that he's trying to compete in a team where you've got big money signings, so he doesn't get to play as often. But when he does come on, I think it's a bit, you expect a lot from him. And I think he just needs a bit of time. And potentially the position he played at Arsenal before he went on loan to Newcastle was not favourable to him. But when he went to Newcastle, we saw what happened there. He was just, scoring left, right, and centre. And I think the team in Newcastle, they make him look a lot better. Not that he's not good. They play to his strengths basically. And I think if he comes back to Newcastle, whether it's permanently or on a loan again, which I've heard about, I think you guys will be very, very lucky. It's unfortunate for us because Arsenal fans are not very patient, me included, even though we have slipped over the last couple of years. Probably Joe Willock does need to go on loan, I think, at this point. So, yeah, you should definitely take him back.
Definitely, I think the talk of the transfer is like a loan with a future fee, which is Newcastle right down to a T. We probably wouldn't sign him at the end of the season, but we will have to see, of course. Billy, come to you next. Wolves, have they been a bit quiet in this transfer window so far, or?
We got a lot of business done early. We brought in Jose Sarr, Yersa Mosquera, Trincao came in on loan. We signed 8 new permanently. But since then, it's been about 2 or 3 weeks. There's been no new incomings, no real rumours. We were linked to Divock Origi for 10 million over the past couple of days, but apparently Liverpool holding out for 20. Most of our rumours have been for outgoings, the likes of Owen Otasowie, Patrick Catrone, Rafa Mir, who got a hat-trick for Spain at the Olympics. But it's seeming like it's a sell-to-buy policy at Wolves at the minute. Most likely that being Ruben Neves or Adama Traore leaving. But it feels like money's tight and Bruno Lage isn't being fully backed as of yet.
With Wolves, what position do you reckon you need the most?
Definitely a centre-half or a centre-mid. They're both positions that are a bit... we've not got many players. I think we've got 4 centre-mids that are up to playing Premier League week in, week out. And we've maybe got 3 fully fit centre-halves at the minute. So it's a bit of a small squad. Bruno Lage has made no secret that he wants to add to it to get 2 players in each position that are able to play week in, week out. But you've got to spend some serious money to do that. I think it's only Man City in the whole league who have that sort of squad. So it'll definitely be a challenge as of now.
Of course, yeah, it will be quite a challenge, I think, to get a big money sign, and especially with the money that's been going around for the likes of Jack Grealish, who we will get on to, potential money for Harry Kane, Romelu Lukaku. Theo, moving on to you now. Of course, we were talking before the podcast about how Arsenal seem to get linked with absolutely everyone, and they do. They were linked with Jack Grealish before all the Man City stuff was going about. James Maddison looks like the big one at the minute. Of course, apparently a £51 million bid has been placed by Arsenal. Still yet to hear about any confirmation of that at all. But, has there been sort of any other sort of talkings about in regards to Arsenal transfers?
So we've had this guy from Inter who's been linked with us. And he did really well. He linked up with Lukaku last season. But he apparently wants Champions League football, which we can't give. But we can obviously pay him big wages. But apart from that, it's just been him and then Maddison as well. But I don't know if we need a Maddison, which is the problem. Because if he then comes, we've had Smith Rowe, who broke out into our team last year. And he's done absolutely amazing. But Maddison, from what I've heard from him, he doesn't consider himself as a number 10. He's more of a just slightly further back midfielder, not a number 6, not a number 10, but sort of operating in that role. Yeah. So if he does come, he's had some problems with injuries, but can Arsenal guarantee him to play pretty much most games and then leave Smith Rowe, who's just signed a new contract? He probably got told he's going to play loads of games and he's been given the number 10. So if Maddison does come, it'll be great because we need a bigger squad, but we are only in the Premier League and then playing League Cups. So the bigger squad, we've already got a bloated squad already. If he comes, I don't know how that's going to work. A lot of people who support Arsenal have been saying we need to get rid of at least about 10, 11 players, and none of them have gone. They're still here. So
that was what I was going to ask you about. Just in regards to
Yeah.
outgoings, has there been sort of any talk of any players from Arsenal leaving the club, or?
The only players that have left are academy players that had to go out on loan. That's pretty much it. But no one from the first team who we really need to get rid of. So I don't know if Maddison comes in for 51 million. It sounds like another bid when we made a bid for Suarez all those years ago.
Yeah,
40 and something million. I just think they're just playing hard to get. But I don't know. We'll see.
Definitely playing the field. Dan, we'll move on to you. Liverpool been a bit quiet this transfer window, but has there really been anything else in the pipeline, or?
Definitely been quiet, and to be honest, in the pipeline might be a little bit strong. Linked with all and sundry is probably more accurate. We signed Ibrahim Kanate obviously early on in the window, which was a must considering the defensive problems.
Yeah,
that we all know about. I don't know if you know, we had some central defenders injured last season. But yeah, he was a must, and that was good business early doors. After that, it's been a bit of a sell to buy thing at Liverpool as well, to be honest with you. Like, we don't generally go out and splash cash. Like, our big money signings have come from the sales of Coutinho and Suarez previously. And now we just kind of sell fringe players to raise money. Like, Harry Wilson's gone to Fulham, and Marco Grujic has gone back to Porto, and we're looking to get the likes of Shaqiri, and hopefully, if Wolves will take him, Divock Origi off the books. But yeah, in my opinion, we need to sign a centre midfielder to replace Wijnaldum, and we need to find a forward just to offer a little bit more competition / cover / support for the likes of Salah and Mane. Who that is, I'm not entirely sure. We've been linked with the likes of Adama Traore, who I think would really suit Liverpool, to be honest. And as for midfielder, we've been linked with loads of them as well. Saul Niguez is probably the strongest one from Atletico Madrid. But yeah, it's Liverpool tend to just all of a sudden do business. We've signed a lot of people down to new contracts. Alisson signed one tonight until 2027. And the Jota deal last summer kind of came from nowhere, again, as Billy you'll probably remember. So hopefully that's the case this summer and something just comes up out the blue.
Of course, now we've spoken about all our individual clubs' transfers. Let's talk about some of the transfers just going around the league. I think the big one today, or the big couple of ones today, of course, the first one, Jack Grealish to Manchester City, seemingly out of the blue once again. £100 million bid has been accepted with British tax. They'll probably get about £50 million, Aston Villa, for that transfer. Medical tonight for Grealish and possibly confirmed by tomorrow. Billy, I'll come to you on this one. What do you make of that deal?
Well, living in the Midlands with a few Aston Villa mates, it's definitely been interesting, to say the least, today. A few mixed reactions from them. But I think, or speaking about it last night on the Midlands podcast, that it's not a case of City necessarily needing to buy Grealish now, but it's more Pep wanting to freshen up the attack before it goes stale. And I think it's a good move for all parties involved. City are getting a world-class player. Jack Grealish is getting Champions League football and a great chance of winning, the Premier League, FA Cup, Champions League. And Aston Villa, as we've seen, they're getting £100 million. They've got Danny Ings, Leon Bailey, Emi Buendia, a bit more money to splash around. So I think it's definitely a good deal for all parties.
Of course, yeah. I think it'll be very interesting to see how Jack Grealish fits into that team. Dan, I'll come to you next on this one. Of course, Danny Ings going to Aston Villa. That one was really out of the blue. Seemingly no sort of rumours or anything like that. It just happened. Being a Liverpool fan, of course, Danny Ings played for you for quite a while. Do you reckon that's a good move for him?
Yeah, I do. I wouldn't have said that probably at the start of the window, but when you look at the business Villa are doing and the way they seem to be heading, it's hard to almost disagree with Danny Ings' aspirations, because I know he said he wants to play in Europe again because he's that level of footballer. It's just injuries that have killed him, and they certainly did at Liverpool. It was brutal. I mean, I wanted him to do so well. He just never got a chance because it was just constant knee problems.
Yeah.
But yeah, Villa look like they're looking to push towards top 6 as a sort of a minimum. And Danny Ings going there to help them do that makes a lot of sense, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think I completely agree. Looking at the signings that they've made, potential signings as well. I think James Ward-Prowse is in the looking likely to go to Aston Villa as well. So 2 potential Southampton players moving from Southampton to Villa this transfer window. It looks like it could be a really, really good season for Villa, possibly aiming for them European spots. Theo, coming to you next on this one, of course. Maybe you're a fan of the other North London club, but you can't talk about Harry Kane for us. £160 million potentially. Harry Kane seemingly going on strike from Tottenham training. Doesn't seem to want to show up at all. £160 million to Man City. Do you reckon that would be a good move for him? And, with Man City spending £100 million as well on Jack Grealish, surely there's some rules that they could be breaking here.
Who knows? Maybe it might become like a Barcelona situation or even Real Madrid where they've got surplus players where they need to get rid of them. But I don't know. Harry Kane, I feel like he booked his holiday to Bahamas and Florida on purpose. So he knew he didn't have to come back to training this week because of quarantining and all that kind of thing. But if he goes to Manchester City, maybe it's just a few years. He should have done this a few years ago, sort of like what Grealish is doing now at a younger age. But I suppose he's waited it out, and they've not won anything. For all his efforts, he's still not won a major trophy. So I think this move, if it does go ahead, it's going to be a big move for him. And for England as well, he's doing well, but he's going to be playing during the season with some top players. As a football fan, it will be good to see, but as an Arsenal fan, probably not, because he once played for Arsenal, and look at him now. He's going to be tearing it up in Manchester if he does go. But this gentleman's agreement, who knows? No one really knows. It's probably word of mouth. But I think it's a good move for him, but shame for Spurs. Maybe we'll come on top of them this season.
Of course, I think you must be kicking yourself a little bit. Of course, what could have been for Arsenal with Harry Kane? There's pictures of him when he was a kid, back when Arsenal won the league and the FA Cup, things like that, in the Arsenal shirt, celebrating with the team, with the fans. You never know what could have been. He could have been an Arsenal legend, let alone a Tottenham legend. Moving on, of course, Just moving on to the final topic of today. It's obviously a bit of a serious one. And mental health in sport, I think this Olympics in particular has been, quite a big one on people's mental health. A lot of stories coming out from Adam Peaty saying he doesn't really take much time off, and he feels like he should for his mental health. Of course, the gymnast Simone Biles taking, quite a lot of the finals off for, her mental health as well. Naomi Osaka, not attending tournaments like Wimbledon, the French Open due to her mental health. Billy, I'll come to you with this one. Let's say, a football player wanted to take a break for his mental health. Would you be, annoyed? Let's say like it's peak time in the season. Would you be annoyed that they wanted to do that? Or do you think, it's probably a good thing that they're doing that?
I don't think you could ever be annoyed at somebody for taking a break to, sort out their mental health. I mean, in the cricket right now, England have got India in a big test series, and Ben Stokes has pulled out to protect his mental health. And I think the way everybody's rallied around him and supported him has showed exactly the way it should be. I think, it's refreshing to see athletes coming out and talking about it, and, how they need to take a break just to protect them so they don't get fatigued. And it humanises them a bit more, because, we refer to them by their surnames, a bit robotic, expecting them to be at the top of their game all the time. But if they feel they need to take a break to remain at the top, then let them do it.
Of course, and Theo, moving on to you with this one, of course, mental health is incredibly important. Do you think that football clubs in the Premier League and the EFL are doing enough for footballer and staff's mental health?
Do you know what? I reckon there's probably been things in place all these years, but we just didn't know about it. It's only the last couple of years when, people are being very open about it in the public. But I imagine because clubs probably have therapists and that kind of thing working with their footballers. Like, I don't know if you saw in that All or Nothing documentary, with Spurs, where they had Ndombele talking about, his situation at the time and how he was struggling. And they had one of the club members of staff who sort of mediates between the club and the players. So these things have probably been happening for a long time, but you might hear that, oh, someone's injured or that they're just taking some time off. But now the actual athletes themselves are coming out and saying, this is the situation. Should they get backlash? It's not fair. I agree with Billy, because we're all human at the end of the day. And we can't all be at a high all the time. And I do think, this is a great moment where they can, say, I need to take some time out. Interestingly, I listened to a podcast Hector Bellerin does, and he had Tyrone Mings on, and he spoke about how he got into pro football, being at a pro club at a young age, and then getting let go, doing a normal day job, and then somehow getting back in the game. And he's talked about mental strength and so on. And that happened over a period of years. So if one instance, Osaka not going to one competition, or Simone Biles, withdrawing from the women's final, it's just one thing. And I think we should, just look at them, be like, they're humans as well. And clubs or managers or whoever's in management should protect them, definitely.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. You mentioned Tyrone Mings. He is actually a player who is taking some time out at the minute. Just to focus on his mental health, of course, it's been a very long year and a half. And I think you all have to respect that. These players, like you said, are human. And, it is good that they are taking the time out. Dan, just coming to you on this final one, just regarding, obviously, football players' mental health. Maybe a few years ago, there wouldn't have been as much support for players as there are now. Do you think it would have really changed certain players' careers at any point?
Probably. Yeah, you can think of some case in points down the years, I mean, you want to bring up the likes of Paul Gascoigne. I mean, he struggled quite openly with a lot of different things, if we're going to be brutally honest with you. But the support probably wasn't there. And it was kind of the way football was back then. It was a man's game, you know what I mean? And we're going away from that, and probably for the better, if we're honest, in a lot of ways, because it should be normalised to come out and say, listen, I'm struggling mentally, especially over the past 12 months we've all been living through. This bubble life that football's been going through, it's probably been tougher than ever. But Theo raised a really good point in terms of how many times over the years as a footballer probably been ruled out with a little hamstring tweak or whatever it may be. We've got no idea. And it might not have been that. It might have been something different. But there was a stigma against coming out and saying, listen, he's struggling with mental health. But now, all these sports stars, athletes that we mentioned, they're coming out and saying it. And I think that's brilliant. And that's where we need to be, especially in the times we're living in. But in terms of, the support they would have had and now have, it's probably changed tenfold because it's just becoming so much more accepted. And, the studies into men's mental health in particular has become so much more widespread that football clubs probably have to do some due diligence on it now and get people involved and make sure their players are protected mentally as well as physically. And that's got to be a good thing.
Yeah, I completely agree with everyone. I think Dawn is summed up really well here. It is okay not to be okay. And I think, of course, if anyone is struggling, then, you have friends around you who you can get in touch with. And, of course, everyone at Local TV is always here to help. Just before we end the podcast, guys, I want to get a little prediction from you just on who we think is going to win the Premier League this season. We can talk about relegation another time, but I think putting yourselves down to a favourite to win the title would be quite good to end this podcast on. So, Billy, I'll come to you first.
With the news that's coming out tonight, with Lukaku wanting to push through move to Chelsea, and the way that Thomas Tuchel got them playing, it's got to be Chelsea for me.
Chelsea, very, very interesting. Theo, we'll come to you next. Who do you reckon could win the league this season?
After watching Chelsea on the weekend, I would have said, but I've seen Man United get Varane, Sancho, and they've already got a very good team there. And I think maybe this is the year because United fans have been very patient. So I'm going for Manchester United.
Manchester United, that's maybe a bit of an outside choice if you were saying that last season, but this season you never know. I think it could be a horse race between a few different teams. Dan, coming to you next, maybe a bit biased with this one, but what are you saying?
Possibly a little bit biased, yeah. I do think we need to make a couple of signings before I'm going to sit here and say we're going to win the league, but I think them signings will come, so I'm happy to predict that we will. I do think it'll be between us, City, and Chelsea. I think we're actually going to see a title race as well for the first time in a few years. As for United, for me, we're looking at Guardiola, Klopp, and Thomas Tuchel compared to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Like, we're talking chalk and cheese in terms of level of manager here. I agree with the squad United have got outstanding. And if you put one of those other managers in charge of that squad, you never know. But not for me, not with Solskjaer. But yeah, listen.
Who knows?
We're talking elite managers here, not for me. But yeah, I think Liverpool need to make signings, but I am gonna say us.
Liverpool, very, very interesting. I think I've got to agree with Billy and say Chelsea could win the title this season. The way that Tuchel got him playing, like they said, hot off a Champions League win. Of course, one of their biggest players, Jorginho, hot off a European Championship win as well. And a lot of people calling for a Ballon d'Or for him as well. Maybe we'll have to see. But I think Chelsea will win the league this season. If they get Lukaku as well, it would be massive. I think Kai Havertz could come into form this season. Timo Werner, of course, will be a lot more confident this season, but we will have to see. It was good to get your predictions in there, just so we can sort of pencil them in a little bit earlier. Of course, that is the end of the podcast, though. If you missed it, then you can, of course, catch this on the replay. Or if you want to listen to next week's episode, it will be on Tuesdays at 8 o'clock. And I hope you've really enjoyed this episode. Guys, thanks so much for coming on. It's been an absolute cracker. Hopefully we're making history here with the first ever episode of Box to Box. But we'll just have to see. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.